Well, well, if it isn't the galaxy's most glorified grave robber. Trazyn the Infinite, huh? Infinite what? Bad taste in relics? You can keep collecting your dusty little souvenirs, Trazyn. We blood ravens don't need to dig up ancient garbage. We just acquire what's useful. You know, in the name of the Emperor, of course.
Oh, spare me the sermon, Raven. In the name of the Emperor, you say? Right, because when you acquire things, it's always for a noble cause. How many times have you borrowed from the Ultramarines again? Or was that an extended loan from the Space Wolves? Honestly, I'm amazed you even leave your battles with your own armor intact, instead of walking away with a shiny new relic from the nearest fallen chapter. I hear you've got quite the collection, Thief Ravens.
Ah, yes, the great Trazyn, keeper of broken Tau drones and Eldar knickknacks. Let's not pretend, Trazyn, you're nothing but the galaxy's biggest scavenger hunt champion. At least when we take things, they get put to good use. Unlike your little museum here. What's next? Going to bag yourself a tyrannid tooth and call it art?
At least I collect things that are worth preserving. You? You loot like a Magos on his first tech heresy spree. I've seen Mechanicus cults more subtle than your chapter. Honestly, the way you swoop in after every battle to salvage, and I use the term loosely, whatever you can get your hands on, it's a wonder you haven't collected yourselves a bad reputation. Wait, too late for that.
Funny thing coming from you, Trazyn. Weren't you the one who collected a whole squad of Ultramarines and didn't bother to tell anyone? The Ultramarines. You do realize they're like the one chapter you don't mess with unless you want Gilliman personally breaking down your tomb door, right? And what do you do with them? Stick them in your weird little gallery. Bet they're having a real good time gathering dust in there. Good thing you're around to preserve history, right?
Oh yes, I'm sure your chapter would never stoop to such acts. Except that time you rescued, or should I say stole, that Terminator armor from the Dark Angels. Oh wait, my mistake. Requisitioned it, right? No need to bother the First Legion with paperwork when you can just take what's needed. How very convenient. But don't worry, I'm sure they won't mind. Much.
That armor was practically gathering dust. We were just putting it to good use, unlike you, who grabs things, locks them up, and probably loses half of it in some vault marked miscellaneous. You're like a walking flea market, but with less personality. And by the way, at least when we show up after a battle, we don't take entire populations of people. What's the matter, Trazyn? Run out of Necron friends to put in your toy box?
Ah, yes, because taking artifacts is somehow more honorable than collecting people. Let's not get too self-righteous, shall we? I'm preserving living history. Who else can say they've got a working Eldar aspect warrior from the fall in mint condition? Besides, I hear your chapter's a bit light on recruits these days. Maybe I should start collecting blood ravens. After all, someone has to make sure you're remembered, especially after your fleet mysteriously disappears one of these days. Wouldn't be the first time, would it?
Remembered? By who? Your wall of trophies? Let's face it, even your own dynasty thinks you're a relic from a time best forgotten. You're like that one Necron that everyone pretends doesn't exist during dynasty meetings. Oh, Trazyn's got another Eldar corpse, how fascinating. Meanwhile, Imhotep is out there actually doing something useful. I bet even he requisitioned a few pieces from your vault when you weren't looking. Not that you'd notice.
Imhotep can barely dress himself in the morning without consulting a Catan shard. But you wouldn't know about loyalty, would you? Considering your chapter doesn't even know where it comes from. Thousand Suns, maybe? Or perhaps you're just waiting for Magnus to come knocking, asking for his library card back. I'd check the shelves if I were you.
Oh sure, let's compare loyalty, says the guy who's been quietly pinching his fellow Necrons' artifacts for millennia. I bet the Silent King loves having you around, Trazyn. Every time he misplaces a shiny new Doomsday Ark, he probably checks your vaults first. And you talk about us like we're thieves. At least we fight for what we take, not sneak around like a lictor at a dinner party.
Fight for it? Is that what you tell yourselves? I imagine that sounds quite heroic when you're pilfering artifacts from your allies' armories. How noble of you. taking what's needed for the Emperor. But at least I'm honest about my acquisitions. You make it sound like a service. I bet the Inquisition's already got your chapter on speed dial every time something goes missing. I'd call it thievery with paperwork.
Hey, if you're going to take something, at least have the decency to use it. Unlike you, stuffing entire companies of Cadians into stasis like they're action figures. And don't even get me started on that time you tried to collect Creed. What? The guy wasn't tactical enough for your taste? You Necrons have a real weird idea of preservation, Trazyn. Then again, I suppose that's what happens when your brain's been rattling around inside a tin can for a few millennia.
And yet, despite all your swagger, here you are. The Blood Ravens, warriors of legend. Or was it librarians of legend? Hard to tell. You're just a chapter of magpies, always grabbing what isn't yours. But the difference between you and me, Raven, is that I don't pretend to be noble about it. I collect, I preserve, and I enjoy watching as the rest of you squabble over the crumbs of a crumbling imperium. But you can't even decide if you're thieves or scholars. Hypocrisy suits you, Raven.
Hypocrisy? Coming from the galaxy's biggest kleptomaniac? At least we don't lock what we take behind glass and stare at it for eternity. We put it to good use, fighting your kind and worse. You're just another shiny relic sitting in a vault somewhere, waiting for the day someone forgets you even existed. But go ahead, Trazyn. Keep pretending you're doing the galaxy a favor. We'll be out there actually making history while you're busy, collecting it.
And when you're all gone, Raven, I'll be there to collect what's left, probably still warm from the battlefield. You and I both know history is written by those who survive, or those who know how to preserve it.